I want to acknowledge that there are some folks with us tonight, some commissioners that we want to make sure folks are aware that are here. They will eventually be able to join us on the stage. I especially want to say that Chief Pedro Martinez from CPS is here, as is Commissioner Brandy Kanazi. I saw her in the crowd, and we're also going to be having a few more folks join us very shortly. I also want to make sure that we say thank you to our wonderful host. Chancellor Juan Salgado is here. Chancellor, you want to raise your hand so everyone can see you. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. And of course, we want to thank the President Janowski, who is also here, President of Daley College, for making this space available to us so that we can have this very important conversation. I'm going to invite the President to give us a few remarks. I do want to remind you that this is being recorded. It will be shared. So if that's an issue for you, this is the moment to get up and go, but I hope you stay, because I said this is going to be a very important conversation, very timely, and we're really eager to hear what you have to say. So first, I'd like to bring the President up here to give some welcoming remarks. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Janine Janowski, and I have the absolute pleasure of serving as the president of Richard J. Daley College, and we're so pleased that you're here at Daley College. You know, we thank the mayor, we thank Mayor Lori Lightfoot and her administration for choosing Daley College to have this important conversation with all of you and with all of us as we think about and hold this town hall this evening for moving forward with action. So I will look forward to the dialogue, I look forward to the recommendations, I look forward to the thoughts that come out of this conversation this evening. And thank you all for being here at Daley College. Daley College is committed to lifelong learning. We offer programs in continuing ed, in credit programs focusing on certificates as well as associate's degree, as well as adult education and GED programs. So we hope you have an opportunity to walk through the college, see some of the things that we have here, and hopefully you'll choose to come here for Daley College, not only for events, but also perhaps for continuing education for you and your family. So welcome again, and I look forward to this evening.
Thank you so much, President. Thank you again. Why are we here? This is a conversation, 5 of 6, that we've had throughout the city. This is our Southwest Town Hall on Public Safety. We've been convening these town halls in regions across the city because we know that each region may have a different need, perspective, or concern. And we have 3 goals for all of these events. First, we want to inform. We want to be sure that you know what has been done, what is being done, and what is being planned. Next slide. On your table, you will see a sheet that lists some resources that are available. These are resources you can look into, and there's websites connected to them. There are also resource tables outside where you can go and connect with city employees to learn more about resources available to you. There is also, sorry, that's with the clicker, thank you. This is what the citywide resource flyer looks like. Next slide. There is also another flyer on the table that shows our 2022 budget investments. We really feel strongly that there should be an awareness of the investments, because investments is an important part of the conversation when it comes to public safety. Everyone in this room, including law enforcement, knows that law enforcement alone is not the answer to public safety. We must continue to address the root causes of violence. And if you look at that flyer, you will see that $1.9 billion total in investments in youth, programs, jobs, housing security, trauma recovery, public health, mental health, and other services that we know prevent violence from happening in the first place. Significantly, these figures do not include the billions invested by our sister agencies like CPS, parks, CHA, and libraries. All of those investments also help address the root causes of violence by giving people purpose, programs, and hope. Next slide. Second, we want to be thought partners with you in solving this most pressing problem in our city. We have already asked you to complete a survey, which we hope you have done. There's a QR code on your table. If you haven't had a chance to please fill it out. It's in English and Spanish. We also have a worksheet on your table, one per table, that's by design. And in a little bit, you're going to be asked to work together as a group to share with us the 5 things that you think should happen to make our city safer. These sheets will be collected at the end of this meeting. All of your ideas will be consolidated and compared to the same insights we're collecting in the other regions. This will be captured in a report that will be prepared after all of our engagements are complete. And finally, most importantly, I suspect, is that we want to hear from you. You received a question card when you signed into the event. There are also some blank ones on your table. Please fill them out. Give them to the city staff. If you have a question or comment, we want to hear from you. The city staffers will be picking up these questions as we go throughout this event. And if you need more question cards, please raise your hand. We really want to hear both your comments and your questions. By collecting the questions, we have found that we're able to group them together and get through most of them, and get through most of the topics. It also gives us insight into what's most important for each communities that we visit. And I promise we're not doing this to avoid the hard questions. It's often the tough questions that get us closest to our resolution. But the mayor, the CPD superintendent, and other city leaders will be arriving shortly, and they want to hear from you and answer as many questions as they can. And again, those that are not answered, we will be captured and put in a report that we will share once this is through. And with that, I want to move on to our next presentation. I'll turn it over to Tamara Mahal, who will share information about what we are doing to implement a coordinated approach to public safety. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tamara Mahal, and I am Chief Coordination Officer for Community Safety. And it's interesting, about over a year ago, I was standing in this very gym overseeing the vaccine operation for the city of Chicago as we were opening this site as a COVID-19 vaccine dispensing center. And I have to say that's interesting to me because our approach to community safety really has its roots in our response to COVID-19. The COVID-19 pandemic taught the city a lot of things, both as a whole, where it revealed the very real disparities our Black and brown communities experience every day, but it also taught us that the city has to operate a different way in order to be effective. Our approach to community safety is rooted in the idea that we have to be engaging with community, that community has to drive its violence prevention strategy, and that the city has to be here to support, because ultimately we are here to address the root causes of community safety. And for us, we look at those root causes as really being community blight, lack of opportunity for youth, but also for adults who need long-term stable job opportunities, and also trauma. And we want to work with you to be able to address those root causes by operating in a different way. And so in August, the mayor activated the Community Safety Coordination Center. The CSCC was activated to make sure that we were working on the hyper-local level with data and evidence driving our strategies, but most importantly, that the government was here to act in service of community. Now, what does that really mean? That means that we are going to be bringing, and already are, new resources to your blocks to support you as residents, to address safety issues, but also implementing a comprehensive strategy that takes, as Nubia mentioned, billions of dollars of investment and really works to address the infrastructure needs of the community, to make sure that we have great programming for our youth, that we're improving and always working on our school system, and that we're rebuilding the relationship between police and the public. And at the CSCC, we're doing that in a few specific ways. Now, earlier today, we announced new initiatives that are going to be coming to you, which includes our ability to reimburse you if you would like to buy security cameras, security lights, if you'd like to buy self-installed vehicular tracking devices, but also our ability to work with you to form new block clubs and really reinforce the existing relationships that you have with your neighbors. A couple other things that we're doing is really working to address what we've heard from community. And when we've been out and engaging, we've heard a few key things. Yes, we need more supports for mental health, but we need to implement trauma-informed services now. We do need to make sure that not just our youth are supported, but the 18 to 24-year-old population, which accounts for the majority of perpetration and victimization of violence in this city, has the supports that they need, and forming a better safety net for adults. We need to increase the green space, not just on the blocks, but improve the parks and the other areas where people so commonly go. The number one thing that we heard, especially from our community-based organizations, was more support for coordination. So that if we have street outreach workers who are working with those at highest risk of violence, they have the ability to provide direct services back to people in housing, jobs, mental health, and other areas. And this is how we're working in support of you to ensure that we can address those root causes. Now, final thing, next. The CSCC is built for action. It's what we're here to do, is to get stuff done on behalf of community, but we need your feedback in order to do that. So as Nubia mentioned, you do have QR codes. There's also web addresses. We strongly encourage you to fill out that survey today. And what I can assure you is that that is going to turn into action. If you answer questions like, what would you prefer? Cameras, lights, resources for your block? We're going to be back to bring those resources to you. And if you put a really great idea, you might be surprised to see that idea launched for summer to help prevent violence and ensure you're a community that is safe for you. All right, thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you so much, Tamara. This on? Perfect. So we are actually going to get into the roundtable discussions. First, this is going to be the last call of a few last calls of the questions. So again, there's a question card on your table. Please fill out your question and comment. If you prefer to do it en español, si quieres escribir tu pregunta, no hay problema. We can pick it up in a different language as well. We really just want to capture as much information as possible. It looks like that. Thank you so much. Beyond the questions, this is the fun part. Please introduce yourself to your table mates. We assigned your table randomly, so we want to make sure you get to know each other. Introduce yourselves, assign a record keeper. There is one worksheet per table. Again, we're going to want you to have a discussion about the top 5 things the city needs to do to make the city safer. A consensus is not necessary, but it is helpful. You're going to have about 30 minutes to work on this worksheet together, and I'll come back in a little bit to give you about a 5-minute warning. Thank you. If you are not seated, please take your seat. We're going to get started with our question and answer. Thank you so much for the robust discussion. I'm really excited to see those worksheets. We're going to have the Q&A component. We have some folks here on the stage. I'm going to let you get settled to look at the stage as those chairs scrape the floor. But before we start with the question and answer, Mayor Lightfoot is going to kick us off with some opening remarks. Mayor?
Okay. All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for spending your Monday night with us. I was at many tables and had, I think, rich conversations about issues that are on your mind. The point of these town halls is for us to hear from you. We want to understand at a neighborhood level what it is that you feel like you need to feel safe. We know that 2021 was not a year that any of us can feel proud of when it comes to public safety. And the superintendent and I and others here really recommitted ourselves to hold ourselves more accountable, to look at what worked, but importantly, look at what didn't work and make necessary changes so that we could see a difference in 2022. Now, it's way too early to know how the year is going to come out, but I'm happy to report that what we've seen is a drop in homicides, a drop in shootings, and a drop in carjackings. And a lot of that is because we are digging in with you, members of the community, to make sure that we're getting it right. There's no one size fits all. We are working in concert with residents and other stakeholders across the city. Now, a couple of the themes that I heard from the tables that I was at. One is, what are we doing to support young people? I think there's kind of a universal feeling that if we do more to support young people, we're going to see them have more opportunities and then as a consequence, hopefully, put down the guns or otherwise not be involved in criminal activity. We agree with you 100%. That's why if you look on your tables, on the budget sheets, you're going to see that we're making very specific, concrete investments in young people through our investments. We're investing in making sure that young people can pursue their passions in out-of-school time. You'll hear from CEO Martinez about the investments that CPS is making specifically. We're bringing trades and other career opportunities into our junior high and high schools. And obviously, we're also making sure that we're doing everything that we can to support young people who are experiencing trauma. There were a lot of young people in our city who were exposed to too much violence for far too long. And pre-COVID, it was tough for them. As a result of COVID, the trauma that people were feeling, particularly young people, has exploded exponentially. So making sure, as we have done, that we're targeting resources around trauma and mental health at the community level, so to support our young people and others is a big part of our investments that we're making. We also know that when you have a healthy, vibrant community, you're not lacking basic amenities. I heard from a number of you, crumbling streets, other infrastructure. Well, we started a capital plan, we're in year 2 of it, that was passed by the City Council 2 years ago to make sure that we are bringing infrastructure investments to every neighborhood in Chicago. That is ongoing. Also, every year, as hopefully you know, the aldermen identify for us through $1.5 million that they get every year, where in my ward do we need new streets, curb cuts, work on alleys, lighting. Those are things that the aldermen identify. So the capital plan is on top of the ward-specific investments that were being made. And then, of course, with the federal infrastructure dollars that will be coming, we'll even add to that even more. So I will stop and just say this. While we have made progress already in the first quarter, we know that we've got more road to travel to bring safety and peace to every neighborhood. It's not a one-size-fits-all plan. We've got to attack community safety in a multiple tiered level. We're focused on gangs. We're focused on guns. But we're also focused on investments. Those of you who lived in the city for a number of years know that every few years we go through this cycle of a spike in violence. It happened going back at least to the 60s and 70s. And every time, historically, when we've seen this large spike in violence, what have we done? We've thrown overwhelming police resources at the problem. But has that made our neighborhoods safe in the long term? The answer is no. So we've got to look at not just trying to arrest our way out of this problem, but truly invest our way out of this problem. The violence that we are seeing, we believe, is a public health crisis. And we've got to view this through the lens of public health and really look at what are the root causes of the violence. And a lot of it revolves around the lack of investments in people and places for far too long. Now, I don't want to mislead you. If these were simple issues to solve, we would have solved them. They are not. They are generations and decades in the making. But they're happening on our watch. And we have an obligation to you as our residents to do everything we can now to make a difference for the longer term. We absolutely have to hold violent, dangerous people accountable right now. Our police department last year saw more homicides than in the previous 19 years. And they're on a good pace this year to do the same. I mentioned that carjackings were down. But the one thing that we have to focus on is the number of juvenile offenders involved in carjackings is up. So that's another long-term and immediate problem that we've got to solve. But we need your help to do it. We need to hear from you, as we're hearing tonight, about what you're seeing in your neighborhood and your block. We are deeply committed to more and more engagement with the residents of the city to solve the problems that you are seeing manifest themselves on your block, in your neighborhood, and in our city. That is the only way forward, is deep engagement and collaboration together. That's why these gatherings are so important. Now, I also heard from a number of you, I wish we had more people come out. And I agree. We've seen much larger numbers in other parts of the city, but that's a problem that we can solve with your help. Help us help you reach your neighbors who I think care and are concerned, but we need to get them into these conversations as well. It can't just be on a small group of people in a neighborhood, but it's a good start. So I don't want you to be discouraged by the numbers who are here. Let's be determined to figure out how we exponentially expand the number of people who are here to get other neighbors involved in the conversation around community safety. And we are very, very committed to do that. Last thing I'll say is this isn't one and done. This has got to be an ongoing discussion. And we need you, residents of this area, to help lead that. We're going to be here. We'll support it. But if it's just the mayor convening, it's not going to reach people in the same way if it's neighbor to neighbor. So there's lots of ways for you to get involved. There's a number of great community organizations that are at tables around the room, and I'm grateful for those of you who have come. But we've got to also activate those neighbors who are reluctant, who have an opinion, who have concerns, but how do we get them into a meaningful conversation? Because that's then the way that we turn the tide and make a difference in the quality of life of neighborhoods, but also in community safety. So once again, thank you one and all for being here, and we look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor. As mentioned, we're going to start the question and answer portion. Before we begin, we do want to introduce the rest of the folks on this stage. If Commissioner, starting with Commissioner Kanazi, if you want to just say your name and your department so folks can know who you are.
Good evening, and thank you for being here. I'm Brandy Kanazi, Commissioner for the Chicago Department of Family and Support Services. We manage everything from birth all the way through the senior years, and we've got 6 community service centers.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Pedro Martinez, blessed to be your CEO for the Chicago Public Schools, serving over 330,000 children, over 600 schools, and thank you for being here tonight.
I'm David Brown, Superintendent of Police for the Chicago Police Department. We're here to serve you. We're here primarily to listen to your concerns and address those concerns through follow-up. Now, we are focused on our visibility, on our engagement, and our collaborations, not just with you, but with all of our stakeholders in the community that improve public community safety. So, looking forward to the questions this evening. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Tamara Mahal, Chief Coordination Officer for the Community Safety Coordination Center. We are working to bring together all of the city departments and agencies to work with you to implement a comprehensive violence prevention strategy in your community. Thank you.
Hi, folks. Thanks for coming out. I'm Allison Arwady, Commissioner at the Chicago Department of Public Health, and we are really excited about taking some of the lessons of COVID, where the whole city got involved and worked on getting us through the pandemic to this point, taking some of what worked on that and working on public safety. So really pleased to be here and appreciate all your time.
Thank you, everyone. We are going to get started now in the question and answer portion. Before that, I promise we'll get to it. I do want to thank both the West Side Infrastructure Coalition for the information they provided, as well as a few other residents who provided some really great and detailed information. This will be captured in the report, so appreciate that. Let's get to the questions. The first one is one that we see often, and I think I'll start with Mayor Lightfoot and then Superintendent Brown if you want to add anything. This is from a resident named Jennifer. The city spends more money on the police than it does on all social services combined. Listen to us when we say we don't want more money for the police. Do you have a response?
Sure. Well, first, I don't know that your numbers are correct, because we are spending a significant amount of resources on a wide range of other city resources, as you can see from the investment sheet that's in front of you. But I think the nub of the question is, we want more investment. When I talk to people about this defund question, which I think is at the essence of the remarks, I ask folks, do you really mean that you want less police officers? Because what that means in the city of Chicago is that we would be cutting personnel, it'd be cutting people. If you look at the police budget, over 90-something% of the police budget is around personnel. And most people, when I ask them that question and provide them with information, say, no, that's not what we want. But what we want is to make sure the community outside of the police department is being invested in. And we agree, it's got to be both and. We don't want to, I don't support cutting the police budget, because cutting means we're going to cut the more recent hirees who are young, who are diverse, and some of the best trained officers in the history of the police department. So the problem that you want to solve won't be solved by defunding the police, because we go by reverse seniority and cut personnel. And what I hear from residents all over the city is, in this time where people are afraid, they're afraid of violence, they don't want police, don't want less police resources. If anything, they want more. But as I said before, we can't just arrest our way out of the problems. These problems are decades in the making, and many of them stem from the poverty that we see in way too many neighborhoods. When a young person doesn't have opportunity, when they don't see people going to work every day, when they feel like their fate is predetermined, meaning that the only thing left to them is the illegal drug trade in a neighborhood, they're going to be discouraged. The hope is going to go out. That light bulb that's in young kids, where they're enthusiastic and joyful, if that light goes out because we haven't provided support and love and resources, then we are going to see more and more souls lost to the streets because they think that's the only opportunity that they have. We've got to turn that entirely around, which is why we're making some of the investments we're making in affordable housing, in infrastructure, in jobs, in training, in mental health. The list goes on, and those investments were formed by exactly the same kind of engagement that we're entered into now, listening to people all across the city about what they'd like to see and how we could make strategic investments to really improve the quality of life. So to me, it's both and. We've got to make sure that we hold our police department accountable. We need to make sure that they are the best trained police department in the country. And we've got to make sure that we continue to make investments, particularly in neighborhoods that haven't seen their fair share of investments for way too long. Soup, I don't know if you want to follow on that.
Just to add, policing is more than just enforcement. Policing is also prevention. It's investigation, and one shouldn't outweigh the other. Striking the right balance of prevention, that's the whole part of it, that's, dealing with young people, mentoring young people, collaborating with other departments in the city to make sure that we can have a real long-lasting, sustained impact on reducing violence. The best way to reduce crime is to prevent it from happening in the first place. Think about that. So it can't be just enforcement, although that's a part of our job, and investigations is a part of our job. But it's also prevention is a part of our job.
Thank you. Along those lines, we actually have questions from two Ashburn residents. One is about the improvement times of police response times, and the other is, what and how will the city make me feel safe while patronizing restaurants and businesses?
I can take that. So the first one is improving response times. So we are working on improving our response times. One of the ways that we're trying to impact that is threefold. One is, obviously, our officers need to have enough time to be able to respond to calls, not to just go from call to call to call. So more officers from behind the desk in the field. That happens in reassigning them from desk duty to field duties, but it also means having everyone participate in being deployed to field duty, so being out in the neighborhood. So all of our officers have committed some time of their month to being in the neighborhood, working on neighborhoods. Many of our officers are assigned to the same neighborhoods on a regular basis, but some are assigned because maybe they're in investigations and they work, basically filing paper, not really solving anything. Well, one way they can improve solving is to be visible in the neighborhood, in the community. And now people talk to them about the cases that they're working. So there's a lot of ways to free up time for our officers to be more responsive when you call 911, to respond quicker to those 911 calls. We're working on all that, as well as recruitment for our vacancies. So as you know, it's a challenge in this country hiring police officers. We in Chicago have the same challenge that other departments have. One of the things we recently did to, and this is a shameless plug because I'm looking around to see who might be looking to be a police officer in the room. It's an $80,000 a year job after 18 months with a 100% tuition reimbursement. That's a very compelling job, but that's not the best part. It is the most rewarding job because you get to help people. You get to protect people. You get to respond when people are in need. That's the best part of the job. But it's also a pathway to the middle class. So to help us help you, I love when the mayor said that, help us help you, help us recruit for young people in this city that's from the neighborhood to become a police officer. That void that we have can be filled with Chicagoans that have a love and a passion for this city. And we need your help. Help us help you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We do have some questions from West Pullman and Inglewood that kind of encapsulate the same thing about curfew for minors. My concern is the time the youth is on the street after curfew. Where are the parents and who's monitoring the children?
So policing does a lot of duties. Sometimes we do fill the void when young people are out past curfew and there's not a parent around to be that adult, positive mentor. So we fill that void in a lot of ways. One of the things that we've done is create a lot of programs for our young people to interact with police officers. Our Police Athletic and Arts League is one of those programs. We have a chess league. We're trying to spin up a boxing league. We have baseball. Right now we have basketball. I mean, we try to do as many things, and we have the arts, because not all kids are acclimated to sports at all. So we want to have an opportunity to be around young people and have them see that we're just regular adults trying to help, that they see past the badge and the gun. They see past enforcement only. They don't see us as someone to shun. So again, sometimes policing has to fill a void. There is a curfew, and we do enforce it. But again, I go back to, we want to build relationships with everyone in Chicago, particularly our young people, where they make better decisions and avoid the path into criminality. So there's a lot of things that we wear a lot of hats as police officers, and that's what we sign up for. It's the life we chose, and many of us love it and are passionate about it. So I just want to, before I take them, I'm sure I'll ask a lot of questions, but there's a lot of officers in here. Can you all just give these officers that's here a round of applause for the work they do? Thank you.
I also just want to address that issue. There is a curfew. We do enforce it. But we need parents and guardians to also step up. For example, last summer, we had some challenges downtown at Millennium Park. And what we found out as we started kind of deconstructing what happened is a lot of parents were dropping off 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds downtown by themselves, maybe in small groups, at night, and frankly hoping for the best. That can't happen. We have to take responsibility for our children as well. I say this as the parent of a 14-year-old. We have to make sure that we know where our kids are, that we are telling them right from wrong at the earliest possible age. And yes, the superintendent is right. The police department is called upon to do a range of different things. But folks, there's no replacement for that parental love and support and accountability. So I don't want people to think, well, the police department is going to solve all problems, particularly when it comes to young people. No, 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 no. We have to, as parents, as guardians, as that village, make sure that we are instilling in our young people a set of values, and so they know what the boundaries are. That's got to come from the family unit, from the neighborhood, from the faith community, from the block club. We've all got to do that work together to make sure that our young people are supported and loved, but as my mother would say, held accountable. My mother used to tell us all the time, I love you in your mind, but if you're wrong, you're wrong. And that's something I've taken with me as a parent as well. We cannot be afraid to tell our children no and enforce with them what the boundaries are. Sometimes that's hard, sometimes it's really hard, but if it doesn't happen in the home, it's going to be really difficult for the rest of us to try to be the parent for somebody else's children. So we all have to step up and take responsibility.
Thank you. Along the lines, we have quite a few questions actually on youth, and I think maybe the other commissioners and chief will also have some information to provide. We have a few comments from Ashburn. Ashburn's in the house tonight, as well as Little Village, asking how much resources is being given for youth programs. We need to build jobs for youth. We could start with some of the opportunities available.
Good evening, everybody. Brandy Kanazi again, Commissioner for Family and Support
Hold on
Services.
1 second. Can you pump up the volume of her? Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll go over our youth portfolio. We actually received $65 million through the Community Recovery Plan investments for this past year, and so I'll go over our programs. The first one is Chicagobility, and so that's for young people ages 14 and 15 years old. So they're tweens, they're not really ready to work yet, but we still want to get them a taste of career development and a career exploration. And so they earn $450 for the summer. It's a 6-week stipend, and they learn, one, how to create a resume, they learn about career development, financial literacy skills, as well as at the end of the summer, they provide a learning cohort and a project that they present on. Then we have our traditional summer jobs program. That's the summer youth employment program. Young people earn $15 an hour. They work for 6 weeks, and they work 20 hours a week. This is really important because not only are we focusing and providing young people in these cohorts with a career coach, but we're also making sure that we're working on financial literacy, right? That they're getting up on time, they've got the social and emotional skills, they're learning how to deal with, conflict resolution, as well as at the end of the summer, they also present a capstone project. Some of the work that young people do, we do coding, we do a lot of work with aviation, we've got a partnership with Apple, and so we take all of those lessons. We've got traditional jobs, and then IT, and then other cohorts that folks learn on. The third one is our new program that started as a result of the pandemic. We heard a lot from young people that said, with school being remote, they really weren't able to come outside and interact with their peers, and so they wanted to make a difference in COVID. They wanted to have some type of input into their communities, and so we established the Chicago Youth Service Corps under Mayor Lightfoot's leadership. And so this is a program that started, it was just in 6-week cohorts. Now it's year-round. It's going to be 40 weeks for the year. Young people earn $15 an hour. In the summer, they will work 20 hours a week, and they really focus on what is it that their community needs? What is it that they want to solve for? So we've seen capstone projects that focus around housing instability, food insecurity. Some young people have started a podcast, but really just making sure that we have a holistic program for them. Lastly, we have the Kickback series for the summer, and so this is where young people really get to understand, what is it about event planning? And so they create events, and they design events in their own communities, and so on Fridays they have a series where they have, DJs, they have games, whatever it is that they feel is really important for them, and throughout the year that will be year-round as well. They also earn $15 an hour.
So I'll split it in a couple of different groupings. So first of all, we're investing about $290 million in our schools. There are programs that will kick off in the summer. So across our district, every school will have the ability to set up summer programming. And then as we go into the new school year, what I want our parents to understand, so first of all, we have to help children while they're in school when they're struggling, right? When your child is failing a class or is getting behind or needs tutoring, we're making sure that every school has, for example, freed up intervention teachers that actually can work with the children before they get too far behind. Every school will have dollars for after-school programs. Some of that will be our own teachers, some of that will be community partners that are coming in, working with us. They can set up Saturday academies, so those programs will be all around for next year. And then there's programs that we're working with children that we see are at a higher risk. There's a program called Choose to Change, Choose to Succeed, and it really is a program where we're taking students that maybe are starting to get into challenges with the law, working with them, having a case manager with them, making sure that if they've left school, that they come back to school. We help them get jobs if they're at the high school age. And so these are programs that we're also watching and investing also much more so that we can help our children. And hopefully, as the superintendent and the mayor have said, we invest in them so that frankly, because for many of our children, even when they make a mistake, I tell this to students, there's very few mistakes that you can't come back from. And so the key is we just got to intervene early so that we can make sure that they stay on that successful path.
Along the lines of participating and getting involved, we talk a lot about youth, but we had some interesting questions. One is from Old Town. Is there a plan or idea to engage more young, middle-aged folks from ages 30 to 49 to get involved in violence prevention in their neighborhood?
That's a great question. And so often when we talk about violence, we do tend to focus on youth. And yet we know the critical role that those over 18 play. One of our main focuses is really working to build neighborhood relationships back up. In some communities, we see successful block clubs and others neighborhood associations. But what we know is that the stronger relationship that you have with your neighbor, actually the safer block you're going to be living on. And the reason for that is pretty simple. You have each other's back, right? You're working together to make sure that your services are being provided on your block, and you're working together to kind of intervene when something happens. So the city is going to be investing new money starting this summer to actually incentivize those relationships and really reinvigorate block clubs, neighborhood associations. We think that's one of the most successful, one of the best ways that we can work to actually engage that exact age group of not just homeowners, but also tenants, to be able to work together, come up with strategies. We're going to deploy staff out onto the blocks to have conversations and then follow up with actual resources to make sure that when they're working together, they're seeing that work come to something. And so we're really excited for that effort. And I will just also say, as the mayor noted, these town halls are really a first step for us. We're going to be working in our more violent communities to actually do community level workshops where we're bringing people back together to literally sit at the table with us and do work in order to engage them, but also to really be community driven. That way, if you come to me and you say, this vacant lot's an issue, this abandoned building's an issue, where I need help on that corner, we're able to come back and say, you can trust us, we're gonna be here to help you, and actually watch that action plan get put into place. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. We have some questions that are region-specific, which we're great to have received. One of them is another resident from Ashburn asking, stating that they're a single African-American female, asking when will the task force that was promised be put together to address the many dead black women that are being found?
I'm sorry, Nubia, can you repeat it?
I'm sorry, I'm going too fast. My bad. It says, I'm a single African-American female, and they're asking when will the task force that was promised be put together to address the many dead black women being found throughout the city?
I still didn't hear the last part.
The question is, will there be a task force that's put together to address the increase of black women who are being killed?
Well, this is something, and I'll start and I'll pass it to the superintendent. We are very obviously concerned with anyone who is shot or killed across our city. We've looked specifically at the data around black women who have been shot and killed. We are working diligently with a number of different advocacy groups, particularly victims, the moms, the grandmothers, and so forth. And I'll give the tease. We're standing up a program through CPD to specifically focus on women who are missing. So stay tuned for that. But this is something that we are putting particular focus on because we know this is a concern for people across the city. And Soup, I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing to what the mayor said. So we stood up a family liaison unit in the homicide unit as a focus on the families of victims of missing and harmed women and others. Why this is important, many times the cases get old and maybe they become cold cases, and the families don't know who to call. Their detective may have retired or been reassigned somewhere, and they're lost in the cracks of our bureaucracy. And we want to always prioritize families and who are receiving all of this trauma because someone they love is hurt, injured, or missing. So these family liaison units, they prioritize and they reach out. They don't wait for families to call us. We go down the list and we call families, and it's separated by the five areas of the city, and we're trying to grow the capacity to do more and more of this. This has been a very successful launch pilot program, but we're expanding it as fast as we can get resources to have more and more family liaison officers assigned just to reach out to families and keep them updated on their case and to take information. Sometimes families hear what's happening in the neighborhood, and they might hear a clue or new evidence, and now they have a direct contact with our homicide and other violent crime units to pass that information on and get it addressed.
And let me just add, these family liaison officers who are embedded within the detective division is specifically focused on families and survivors of unsolved crimes are specifically stood up because of what we heard from families, because of the engagement that we had with a number of different moms, grandparents, and so forth, who were telling us, we feel like we are not being heard. We get a lot of contact the first 30 days, maybe the first 6 months, maybe the anniversary of when the incidents happened, but then it disappears. And so these liaisons are a direct result of the feedback that we heard from family members saying, we don't feel like we're being well served, so we put more resources into it. And as the superintendent said, this is a start, and we want to scale this up because we know that the need is great. I feel this very personally. A very close friend of mine lost her son to gun violence, her only child. And I heard from her years before I became mayor about the fact that it was painful that she couldn't get basic information. Even if the detective didn't have a new update, just having that point of contact was so important and a lifeline for these families. So we take this issue very, very seriously.
So I was just going to add that we also have some additional funding for the first time to really focus on victim services. So as we heard, not, there's the person directly, but their family. Often, if there have been violent events that children are seeing, there can be mental health needs, follow-up, PTSD prevention, et cetera. That's really important, and frankly has not been something that we previously had a lot of funding to be able to support. And so over the course of this year, we are going to be making quite a number of new investments. The health department's been focused on not just clinics, but how do we get mental health services outside of the walls of clinics, bring them to people who perhaps have just had major traumatic experiences and are in acute need of mental health, and it's going to be too much work to try to navigate what is a really complicated system. And so a big push of the health department is both getting mental health services, no wrong door, but also for people specifically who have been victims or very near violent crime scenes.
Thank you. And one of the questions too, I think, Tamara, this might be for you, of the many dollars being invested in CSCC, how much is being considered to invest in the Southwest side?
Taking that one?
Yep.
There you go.
I think clarification about how the CSCC works is important, and so I think it's a great question. We have a couple communities on the southwest side that we are specifically focused on, but the CSCC's real purpose is bringing together all of the city's departments and agencies to help them better understand how they fit and how their mission works through the lens of violence prevention. That's citywide work, right? And there is a lot of money going towards coordination and support of that work, as well as new initiatives that are citywide, like were announced today around the provision of cameras and things like that. But we are going to be working with certain communities like Little Village, like Chicago Lawn, to really put renewed effort into supporting the existing community-based organizations that work in those neighborhoods, and by looking at how we can provide and support additional resources to do things like build up black clubs. So I don't have a specific number, that's the God's honest truth, but I will say we will be here and be present.
Thank you.
Tamara, you mentioned the camera initiative today.
Yeah?
You want to talk a little bit about that in case folks haven't heard about it?
Yeah, I would love to. So one of the things that we've consistently heard is that we need a hyper-local approach, and not one that just says we're going to come to your community, but that we're going to make sure that residents, business owners, condo associations, business, nonprofit institutions have the access to the resources that they need. At the same time, we want to make sure that those resources not only keep them safe, but help us and help the Chicago Police Department to solve crime where able. And so very soon, the CSCC will launch a new initiative that will ensure that if you purchase an outdoor security camera, outdoor security lighting, or a GPS vehicular tracking device for your car, the city's going to reimburse you for that cost. What that means is that whether it's because you have a business location or your home, if you feel like I could do more, I could have more resources that would make me feel safe, maybe you have a gangway that isn't well lit and cost is the prohibiting factor, we're going to be there to support that. We're going to reimburse your costs. I'm not even talking about cheap stuff. I'm talking about nice cameras. And we're also going to support that subscription cost to make sure that you are able to protect your home, protect your business, protect your block, and then where possible, when we have camera footage that catches a crime, be able to say, I'd like to provide that to the police department so we can solve crimes faster. And we did announce that today. We'll be rolling out more details in the next couple of months. But as I mentioned before, we are listening. And that was consistent feedback that we've heard is we need more help in that way. And so the city is bringing that to you. And I should highlight that was Mayor Lightfoot's idea. And we're happy to be able to work with her and get it done.
Thank you. That actually answered folks from Hermosa, from Belmont, and West Lawn. So thank you. People are eager to learn about the cameras. Another hot topic is carjacking. So we don't have a neighborhood, but they're asking, can you share your strategic approach to reducing carjackings and home break-ins?
So we have a carjacking task force that is a collaboration that's broad across the region, not just Chicago. Unfortunately, carjackings are up across our suburban community as well, adjacent and beyond to Chicago. It is a crime that spiked across the country. So what we needed to do was collaborate to be more effective in pursuing these carjacking offenders. And the mayor alluded to this, but nearly 60% of our carjacking offenders we've arrested and charged are juveniles, teenagers and preteens. And so one of the things that, if you look at the data, largely the increases in carjacking are the juvenile offender and the repeat habitual juvenile offender that's cycling in and out of the juvenile courts. So this is where enforcement alone won't have that impact we all want. We have to get on the prevention side of this with these young people. Like I said, the job is prevention, it's enforcement, and it's investigations, but here, the solution is going to be heavily weighted on our ability to be effective at prevention. That means, talking with these young people who are being arrested and charged and talking to them and their families and providing and figuring out what services do they need to support the family structure, this young person, to make better decisions. And I'll let the mayor tell the story about the 11-year-old, but one way to reduce carjackings and to create more safety around your ability to drive around town and take care of any kind of business you like to without being in the fear is to engage with our young people. And if you want to help, one of the things you can do to help in this area, if your church or synagogue has any youth programs, activate those. I think the case study for the last 2 years' crime will be how the pandemic impacted the social service safety net in this country and really escalated people's anxiety, ability to deal with conflict, their increased concern about their personal safety, so now they're going to arm themselves. I mean, the influx of guns, I think all of this dynamic is really going to be the case study for what we are experiencing and what we have experienced. So the solution is all the things we've talked about in these different departments. It's how do we now reactivate the social service safety net to deal with those things that were basically shut down during the pandemic and not accessible to people because of a lot of reasons. I'm sure the restrictions, people worry about their job. So we have to get on the prevention side as a police department. We have to collaborate with all these people on the stage to really be effective at prevention.
So the superintendent teed me up to talk about an 11-year-old carjacking offender. How many of you heard the story last fall about the 11-year-old who was arrested for leading a carjacking crew? All right, some in the room. So this young kid, 11 years old, was literally leading a carjacking crew at 11. And just pause on that for a moment. When the police went to his house to investigate after his arrest, they found like 20 key fobs there, meaning key fobs from 20 different cars. So this kid was a prolific carjacker. And when we arrested him, we started to understand more about what was going on in his life. Number one, he had been missing from CPS for a number of years. So from 9 on, nobody missed him. That's a problem, and that's a fail on our part. Number two, we found out that his mother had died and that his father was gravely ill. Now, no excuse for the things that he was doing, but helps us understand in context what was going on with this young man's life. But once he was arrested and then CPS got involved, there's a good result at the end of this story. CPS, through the Choose to Change program that CEO Martinez talked about, got involved, got him a mentor. The mentor literally goes to his house every day. We got him into a stable living situation. The mentor goes to his house every day, makes sure that he eats, gets up, and goes to school every day. And since CPS has gotten re-engaged with this young man, he has not missed a single day of school. And it's better than that. It's better than that. He recently made the honor roll at his school. So what do we learn from that story? Number one, we've got to do a better job making sure that we're engaged with young people. When I said before, that village, that is real. And then when we find one who goes sideways, we don't lock them up and throw away the key. We find out what's going on that's motivating this young person to get involved in such risky, dangerous behavior. And then we intervene in the right way to get them on the right path. Now, he got involved because he's got an older brother who's about 4 years older who himself is involved in this life. We haven't been able to turn the older boy around, but we're not going to quit. But what we've seen is these young people, when they get arrested on case 3, 4, 5, or 6. So the criminal justice system right now in Cook County is failing these young people because there is not the level of accountability that must be there to deter crime. But we still have a responsibility as a city government, separate and apart from the county, to do our part. Because carjackings, anyone who's experienced it, Anyone who knows someone has experienced it knows that this is the one thing that is so unnerving and makes people feel unsafe. If you're driving in your car and you're at a light, or you're at a gas station, or you're at a grocery store, the last thing in the world that you want or expect is somebody coming up to you with a gun to take your car. It is literally unnerving. So we know that, and we know that these carjackings are really making people fearful. So there's a lot that we have to do to make sure, as the superintendent said, to be on the preventative side. And if we can make a substantial difference, which we are working hard to do with these young people, we're going to see even further drop in the number of carjackings. But the story of this 11-year-old and what can be done gives me hope and optimism that if we do this on a larger scale, as we should and we must, that we're going to turn the tide when we see these juvenile offenders involved in carjackings.
Thank you, ma'am. We have one more question. We have time for one more question. I do want to thank everyone for your questions. They were very unique, very thought-provoking, and again, we're going to compile these into a report. You'll be able to see them. We'll be able to responses as well. Our last question is from another Ashburn resident, and I think a community navigator, so thank you so much for being here. The question is, what special precautions are we taking to protect our streets from gun violence in the summer?
Again, the theme is we're collaborating. We're doing things in ways to engage the community as well as being more visible. So what the summer will bring is, and really I just should start with the context of this. We started already. We haven't waited till the summer to start focusing in on reducing violence. But I think the point of the question is, as it gets warmer, we know violence increases. So what we've done is we've identified through data all the key neighborhoods that have historical higher violence than other neighborhoods. And we put in not only a lot of prevention, but a lot of enforcement and investigations to those neighborhoods. What we need to see, just talking about visibility, engagement, and collaboration, is more visible officers, not just in cars in these areas, but foot patrols and bike patrols. We need to be on the ground more visible. Now, this is going to include for CPD and all hands on deck, so we'll be taking people from behind desk and actually doing some of this visibility work. That will not just be officers standing around not doing anything. We'll be engaging the community and trying to build trust, as well as enforcing the laws that we see being broken. As well as we need to expand our ability to investigate particularly violent crime. So the precursor to the summer has been an additional 200 detectives being promoted as a precursor to what we know will be a faster pace of cases they have to work. So we want to lower violent crime work groups' caseloads per detective. So if we do that, then they have the time to work the case and find the offenders, rather than going from too many cases and not being able to adequately work the case. There's more we can do, but I don't want to take up any more of the time. I would love to. I think I got a lot of information tonight and a lot of names to follow up on, but before you leave, me or my staff will be available to talk in further detail about what we're doing specifically in your neighborhood. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I think from the prevention standpoint, I talked a little bit about this at the start, right? We know that violence is a symptom of other conditions, and so we want to be out there and make sure that we can address those. So what does that actually mean for summer? So that means new investments and new activity to ensure that we can help create safe spaces. That means bringing more activities onto your blocks, into your communities, more programming through parks. It also means more cleaning, right? So making sure that we're out there filling potholes, weeding, taking care of trees, cleaning and greening vacant lots. What does that mean for us? That means providing investment to ensure a vacant lot looks like it was supposed to be there. There's going to be new investments to address abandoned buildings, and we're going to be working with chambers of commerce and businesses to identify how we can also support the corridors. But we're also going to be looking at that support for those that might be at higher risk. So you heard Commissioner Kanazi talk about One Summer Chicago and youth opportunity and employment, but making sure that we're targeting even more of those jobs towards youth that might be at higher risk of violence than others. And I'm sure Dr. Arwady will add to this, but also making sure that where we have people who have experienced trauma and they're at a place of healing, whether that's a faith institution, a school, a youth program, that they have a connection back to a more extensive behavioral health or mental health access. And so we're trying to put a multi-layered comprehensive prevention strategy together that will not only work in collaboration with police, social services, public safety, and infrastructure are working on a data-driven strategy together, but also making sure that we're responding to the community needs through that provision of resources, and then being out on your block so we are visible and present across our departments.
Yeah, I would just add that one thing that we really learned during COVID was how to look very, very micro, look sort of block level. What were we seeing in terms of outbreaks? What were we seeing in terms of vaccine uptake? And then talk to folks in those communities from those blocks and adjust strategies depending on what was working and what wasn't. And so we really have tried to say not just which community area, which side of the city is seeing specific violence, but really at this block level, what can you do to work on structural needs there? What can you do to make those spaces less attractive to people who are trying to sell drugs, for example? And we also, as a city, public health is all about prevention. That is literally what we do. The health care system takes care of you after you're sick. The public health system is all about what do we do to have spaces to remain healthy. And we did have a very small violence prevention program prior to Mayor Lightfoot, and it was less than $1 million for the whole city of Chicago. I had 5 staff, and that's everything from the anti-bullying work to some of the street outreach work. And so we've seen a 20-fold increase in terms of our ability to actually fund some things that have evidence in other cities, fund some of the street outreach work, so people who are out with some of the highest risk folks really engaging, getting folks connected to care. But it is not just one answer for this, just like it wasn't for COVID. It's about how do we set up opportunities and make sure that there's so much to do that we're all rowing together as we work on solving this. So, we certainly are focused on this summer. Every day, pretty much, the mayor says, the summer's coming and what do we have in place, and we want to have it there. But I am confident that we are trying some new and different things, and certainly from the public health standpoint, we have some resources to do things that we have long wanted to do, and we're really focused on working on those. And then just like we did with COVID, adjusting as we see what works well in certain neighborhoods, and keep looking at the data and keep being really honest with all of you about where we still have a long way to go. So there's the short term and the really long-term investments.
You can wrap it up if you would like, Mayor, if you want to close us out,
Sure.
please.
Let me just say again, thank you all for being here tonight. There's lots of things that you could do on your Monday night, but the fact that you are here tells me that you really care about your neighborhood and you care deeply about your city. And I will emphasize again, this is not one and done. This is a next chapter, and what I hope is deep engagement and collaboration across the city, because we need your partnership and collaboration in order to bring peace to our neighborhoods. And I hope that if you heard nothing else tonight, but the takeaway should be this: we have to all be in this together. We talk a lot about the whole of government, and that means that every city agency is charged with looking at the work that they do, whether it's streets and sanitation, whether it's CDOT, whether it's the public health department, DFSS, and others, the work that they do has to be viewed through a public safety, community safety lens. And that's what we mean. But the other part of that, and it's the valuable lesson from COVID, is that we can't move forward as a city without engaging our residents. What your needs are, what the specific things that are going to make a difference in the quality of life in your neighborhood and your block are going to be different from area to area. We are primarily focused on 55 beats in 15 different neighborhoods based upon the data over the last few years where we see the biggest challenges, but community safety is something that we must work on everywhere in our city. So don't think you're going to be left behind. We need your collaboration and engagement. We need you to tell us where your pain points are. You know, we talked at table 3 about a range of different issues, right? Things that they were doing and taking on their own. One thing that I wanted to make sure the superintendent hears about is walk with a cop, right? So people in the neighborhood walking with police officers around the neighborhood to get to know them better, get a little bit of fresh air and exercise, but also identifying areas in the city, in their neighborhood that needed more support. Whether it was a pothole, whether it was a light that was out, they were walking and building those collaborative relationships with police officers. I encourage you to steal that idea. I'm going to talk about that on and on and on because I think it's a great one. But you know what will work in your neighborhood. We don't know that without talking and working with you. So again, thank you all so much for being here. We really want to make sure that we bring a level of peace and safety to every neighborhood in our city. It is the priority. And let me emphasize that again. It is the priority. We have a lot of great things that we should all be proud of as Chicagoans. But all of that light dims if we don't get public safety right. I know it. The superintendent knows it. All of the different city agencies who are involved in this work understand this, and that is the priority for us is your safety. So thank you very much for attending. We'll be around for a little bit if you have other questions. I want to thank the community engagement team. I want to thank the folks from Street Outreach who are here with us tonight. I've got to thank President Janowski of Daley Colleges, Chancellor Juan Salgado of City Colleges, but all the other folks who are involved in bringing this conversation, this important and rich conversation together tonight. Thank you all so much, and God bless.